Mr. Rainwater, we
Yes,
have
Joe.
2 examples of our actual topic discussion on the podcast this evening. Now, I'm here, and you literally just referred to me as Jow.
That's
which
right.
I promise everyone listening was not what my mama named me when I popped out the womb in 1986. And with us this week, once again, we have Soco, which I will not say your actual name, which is displayed in front of me at the moment, who is also using a moniker, I guess is the way to put it. We're all about names in the last 2 weeks. Last week we talked about the art of naming your characters, and this week we're talking about pseudonyms, the actual made-up name that artists use for themselves. And I know a lot of people are probably thinking that maybe even Rainwater is a pseudonym name, but that's your actual given name.
Yeah, this is my fucking last name, so...
no fucks given on your part. But we have different reasons behind why we each have our particular nickname, pseudonym, whatever you want to. What would we want to actually quantify it or qualify it as? Will we call it a pseudonym? Will we call it a pen name? Will we call it
a pod name?
I don't know. Well, see, Jow's not really a pod name for me. It's a nickname that grew into a brand.
Right.
That's kind of what happened for me. Like, it just became like I don't want to say when people refer to me as Jow that it's like a gimmick or a personality, but I do level up my intensity a little bit in terms of how far I'll take things, or you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
there's a little bit of level charisma or personality injection that goes in there just to kind of add that entertainment factor for it. And it's, I've had it since high school, and it just that's my thing. I'm Jow, and like nobody else has that name. So if I make a film and I call myself, directed by Jow or Ann Jow, like that's mine. And It's going to be very hard to confuse that with any other filmmaker. But there are other filmmakers named Andrew. I don't think there are other filmmakers with my last name, but my last name is also kind of hard to pronounce, at least according to telemarketers. So it's just easier to go with Jow. You know what I mean? Like, sure. I've got that built-in, I don't know, the 12 people who know me as Jow, but 12 more than anything else.
Yeah.
But Soco, you use well, first of all, where did Soco come from? Can I ask that?
Oh, yeah, sure. It actually came from a house I used to stay in, a communal house I used to stay in. And it came from my roommates, essentially. It was just one day, I saw 2 of them there just talking. And it was this house filled with a whole bunch of, I don't know for how many people, but it was a lot of people living in this house. And I just came into some sort of discussion, and they were talking about nicknames with me. And they were like, yeah, we've been thinking about some nicknames to give to people in the office. I mean, in the house. And we thought of a good one for you. And I was like, okay, well, what is it? And they're like, Soco. I was like, huh? Yeah, well, they said so is for the South, meaning Southern in this case, because you are from the South. And co is for comfort. And so it actually stands for Southern Comfort, because you make people feel very comfortable when they talk with you and such. No one feels they don't feel uncomfortable talking to you. You just make them feel very welcomed. So we came up with Southern Comfort, and they came up with Soco, short for Southern Comfort.
That's also a booze, is it not?
Oh, is that really it? Oh,
It is.
Okay. Well,
because
there
that's
you
where
go.
I thought it was coming. I thought that's where we were going. Like you just got really drunk off of Soco once, and then it just everybody was like, "Wow, that's him now. He's just 100% made up of Soco."
Oh wow! I wonder if that's maybe they just. Oh man! Now I know the truth, the real truth. They named me
so
after
they
an
gave you the
alcohol.
nickname, but
I don't
but
drink
in the end,
either, so go ahead.
it's they gave you the nickname, but then you made the choice to use it, correct? Is that just how Rainwater knows you?
No, I chose to use it. Matt, Rainwater, Matt knew me of another name. My actual name.
So the decision that went into making that was based on what? Why did you decide to use that name? Not only just generally speaking, but why that particular name did you decide to go with and not make up something else, or
I liked it. I thought it was kind of nice and it's funny. It sounded really funny to me. You could do Soco, something like that. So I kind of liked it.
Soco Loco.
I just liked it like that for that reason. And then why did I start using it essentially?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't want to really. I mean, we've been doing this podcast to BBB for a while now, and we talk about just because of my. I mainly just keep it to hide my identity a little bit for my work stuff. I just didn't want people to easily identify me or anything. That was mainly the reason, because we did talk about sometimes with like politics and such, and I just was like, okay, well, maybe I'm not sure. I didn't want to upset people in the work I do, so that's why I did not really want to reveal my actual name. Essentially, that was kind of the reason. So yeah, that's it.
It's an entirely valid reason. Like, I've been in preparation of this week's podcast, I've been doing my little research, and there are plenty amount of artists, and I would consider you an artist because podcasting is a bit of an art, that used pen names and such pseudonyms simply because they were being satirical or criticizing the modern government or whatever, and they just didn't want the blowback, I guess, from either the government or from people who had those particular political leanings. They wanted to live their lives that way. They wanted to protect family members, all of that kind of stuff. So you're not the first, and I'm sure you won't be the last. I mean, if I wanted to get into a political thing or whatever, I would probably make up an entirely different persona simply because, and not show my face or anything, because if you Googled and Jow, it probably would not be hard to, after a couple of maybe 2 or 3 pages, you'd probably be able to track down what my given name is. And, I don't have anything to hide. Sure, there's shit on the internet that I am not proud of when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Please God, if we can ever get the Russians who control LiveJournal to shut down that page, I would be forever relieved from some of the horrendous, horrific, terrible things that I have said about people, about communities, about society, philosophy, politics, you name it. I am not the person who wrote those anymore. But if I wanted to today, there are things about current government that I have issue with. There's things that I had issue with in the last government. And I think something we all can agree on is if you have any kind of political opinion on the internet, someone out there is going to find it and have an issue with it. Doesn't matter which way you lean. There's going to be people who disagree with you on the internet. They're going to find you. They're going to cuss you out. And I would not say it's the common factor, but there are crazy people out there on every side of every political spectrum who do go too far. And I think artists are some of the people who need to speak up the most. I think when it comes to
I'd agree with that.
things, because not even just podcast people, but artists are I don't know the word here. Observatory in nature? Is that the word I'm looking for, Rainwater?
Observant, empirical.
Observant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've talked about this in the past about when you're a storyteller, you have to kind of understand your antagonist just as well as your protagonist, and you can't judge them for their particular ideals. You have to kind of side with them when you're writing them, or otherwise it's not really gonna resonate. So it's very easy for me to see things, whether it's right or left or centrist, that are wrong, that are right, it's so on and so forth. So if I wanted to voice an opinion, though, here's where the problem lies. I may have built up a fan base on the right wingers, and then all of a sudden, I voice some kind of dissent against that from an observatory thing, and they all take issue with it. And then suddenly, as an artist, my support system of like a fan base will turn against you. And I guess there's no way avoiding this topic with this, but you get canceled, right?
Right.
Isn't that's kind of the thing that'll happen these days? Like everything is unforgivable suddenly. So I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts. And Rainwater, we could start with you, but
Sure.
do you think that it's more powerful for an artist to stand on their own name, kind of like you do, when they have an observation, or do you think it's more important to kind of protect, I don't want to say the bank account, but your livelihood? You know what I'm saying? Like the safety of your family, your own personal safety, your financial safety, all that kind of stuff. What, or is the greater good of progressing society? Because if you have a giant fan base, you have a platform to reach more people than if you made up a new thing and had to rebuild a following. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are about what do you think an artist should do?
I mean, it worked out all right for Prince when he changed gears, like he took he took a road that was like really odd too, because everybody's like, what the fuck is this symbol? The artist formerly known as Prince? Like, what are we supposed to do with this? Worked out anyway for his career, but I mean, once again, that's an artist who at that point was so entrenched that nobody was surprised to find out that he changed his name. Well, they were just surprised what he changed his name to. What's up, Soco?
That's actually he's actually much, people don't realize there's actually a lot of, he was actually being very clever because he had a contract with the studios, and I forget, because there's a time where Prince actually, he made a contract to write so many albums, and I think the studios wanted one way, and he agreed to make so many albums for them. And there's a time of period where he just made a whole bunch of junk albums in order to just appease that contract. Yeah. But then there was a point where he couldn't really use his name for a while either, or something like that. So he found some kind of, all right, he couldn't use his name, or he just found a clever way to kind of use his name so he could, do concerts and still make his the art that he wanted to make.
Right.
It was a big middle finger to them, because and when you write up a contract, they will state, your name, and then like in parentheses right after it, they'll say, hereby wherewithin referred to as the artist. And then when the contract continues, it'll say, the artist will perform 12 venues at this many times for this long. The artist will not get green M&Ms in their room or whatever like that. So he took that whole stripping of identity that comes from contracts and made an identity of it, which was kind of brilliant.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it comes back to our old hat about the signature, like you have all of your work kind of gets pinned to a name. So it's like if I changed my name, right, I would have to start over on some level, because everything that I've done to this point has been associated with my name, with just Matt Rainwater, or maybe even more specifically, maybe people just remember my last name. That's not something that I'm not really fully conscious of. Right. I don't really understand entirely how people relate to my name in regards to my work right now. I just know that people will refer to me on comment boards, for the comics, but that's it, right? Nobody's like, making connections and other things that I've done. But regardless, point being, for me, like, using my actual name has just been convenience. I mean, I would use like a stage name, a performance name, a pseudonym, if I felt like it was going to be more effective. Because I mean, there are tons of artists who like change their name not because their given name was so malfunctional. It's just like their stage name provided better like leverage with audience in the sense of like going back to last week's episode, right? Talking about like what makes a name attractive, how does it sound good, all that stuff. Like Elton John, like that's Reginald Dwight originally, but he became Elton John because he wanted to have like a stage name, something that popped more than Reginald Dwight. And that's often the case for a lot of musicians, you know. I mean, that's going back to Prince, same with Prince. But what were you going to say, Joe? Yeah.
Tom Cruise was not named Tom Cruise. Like, Cruise is just a name that, you know, kind of evokes that kind of action-y hero, you know what I mean? Like thriller type something, you know, something fun, and they went with it. I'm pretty sure Brad Pitt is not his actual given name either. It might be. I might be wrong there.
Yeah, right.
But do you think it's more important for an artist to use their voice and their platform for progression in whatever form it may be, or do you think that it's more important for the artist to be a little more self-sustaining?
I mean, my personal viewpoint is I kind of don't care, whatever it is that they find most important to them, you know? Like, for me, it's like I'm interested, in terms of my platform, I'm interested in just getting what's going on in my head out, you know? And I think that I have a lot of interesting thoughts and ideas that are better out in the world, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I think that they're going to progress society. I have no fucking clue. I don't know what progresses society at this point. Like,
it does take a certain level of hubris to think that you can sway the masses with your political idea or whatever ideologies you may have, and sharing them online. Suddenly everyone's going to go, well, this guy who makes comic books said it, so I should do it too.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
the other part of that is like a lot of that thinking also like really led to really bad mental health on my part, because I was like setting myself up for expectations that didn't make any sense for what I was doing. Like, and I think part of that for me was just like reading other artists whose lives impacted me really heavily, and then I kind of project that onto the work that I'm doing. Like, oh, I'm going to inspire somebody in the same way that these other artists inspired me. But like, there's no telling how people will respond to the stuff that you make. It's not something that you have control over at all. So like, on that level, like I have to really unpin myself from the idea of like my identity needs to be this big thing. Like my name is useful in so far as it tags a little signature to my work so that people can identify me. You know,
they can identify your work, and other than that, it has basically nothing to do with you.
Yeah. And that's kind of my feelings about celebrity too, you know, because like I think that's another, that might be, I'm getting a little theoretical here, but like that might be another reason why a lot of artists will adopt pen names, is to sort of disconnect their original identity once they get into sort of like celebrity, because celebrity is like this whole other like thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a whole other thing where your identity suddenly is transformed beyond just like normal everyday life. And so I'm sure for people who go through that event, like the more that I look at celebrity, the more it seems more like a curse than a blessing for most people, because of while it does bring like, you know, riches and fame, it also brings it brings more attention than any human can like. Go ahead, Joe.
It's a one-sided phone call.
Yeah.
Where the audience gets a connection with the celebrity. Like, they feel like you're friends. Mm-hmm. And the celebrity's getting none of that. They're seeing their bank account grow, and, you know, their agents are telling them all these people are crazy. But, you know, it's like going to a party, and everybody, you know, if you're the most famous person there, everybody's like, oh, that's Matt Rainwater. That's Matt Rainwater. You meet 12 people, you're going to remember 3 of their names.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's impossible for somebody to keep up with that kind of thing. And then it attracts crazy people.
Exactly. That's definitely a big part of it. But go on, Joe.
So Soco, I was going to ask you, you know, you already said basically it's kind of to protect your personal life from kind of getting interfered with because of your job position, right?
Yeah, that's essentially what it comes down to. I mean, sometimes the views and to say, I mean, sometimes my views might upset people or so, and I just don't want to really deal with it. Um, I get kind of tired of the political spectrum a bit. That if you are, for example, if you're left leaning, you need to be having these views. If you're right leaning, you need to have these views. And I hate that kind of nonsense. I think every individual should be thinking on their own. They can take ideas from wherever spectrum it may be and come to their own perspective. It doesn't have to necessarily be all left or all right or whatever it may be. I always find that just kind of ridiculous thinking. However, even like in the fields that I do, tend to be bit more people who are a bit more left-leaning or a bit more liberal of some sort. And not to say I have like right-leaning views, that's not the case. But sometimes my viewpoints might be problematic of some sort for some people, even though they're just viewpoints. And I always think and I'll have to say this, Joe, you were mentioning this earlier about like problematic views from LiveJournal and stuff of that nature. But the thing is like, I think it's a good thing to at least express your views, because you won't know if, for example, they're problematic until you express them and start hearing about how people are reacting. And I say problematic, or you won't be able to even educate yourself until those views are out there, to see they get challenged and everything. Because I think it's always good to be able to kind of express yourself, and then be challenged on that too. And they can maybe even get you some new ideas as well. I do think there's a problem within our culture right now where people are not allowing for people to talk openly. And what's happening is that we're getting these where people are basically, I don't know what the best word to say, but they're kind of freezing up to whereas they're not even willing to welcome any other views at all anymore. It's kind of not. I've heard this in the university settings. It's a very much a problem right now for professors, whereas they can't even use the university system or the idea of university is where people can widen their knowledge. But the problem is that a lot of students are not allowing sometimes they're not even allowing the professors to even express viewpoints. And sometimes they're not allowing other students to express viewpoints as well, too. Not even getting into the perspective that everyone comes from a different background and have different experiences. And especially for those coming from more of a very rural community, whereas they may have not had as much exposure to other cultures or anything like that. And now they're finally getting into a university system and they're getting challenged a lot of the time with different viewpoints. And unfortunately, sometimes they're the people who have been in a more diverse environment are not even realizing that, hey, there are communities out there that don't necessarily have exposure to some things. And it's good to hear from them as well, too. You might not even heard some of those viewpoints. But what's happening is people are being deterred from even expressing anything, and no real knowledge is being built. And I don't know how long this is going to be like this in our culture right now.
Well, it's weird because something that you were kind of talking about was like I'm not even going to say like left or right, but in a particular, whichever way you lean. So say you lean right, you might have a particular ideal about a political issue or whatever that falls right in line with right-wing mentality. But then there's somebody who has a different viewpoint on it that's still right-leaning, but maybe farther right, or maybe it goes a little bit left. And they take issue within the right wing. So you'll have two right-wing people arguing about the same thing that they kind of agree on, but they're still fighting over the fact of how they approach it, whether it's slightly, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I want the green M&Ms. No, the blue ones have the better. Like, it's like the stupidity of like that. It's a weird thing that people will fight no matter where they are. So it's almost like it doesn't matter if you're right or left. You know what I mean? There are people who are, especially online, that are just looking for the fight. And that to me has been what's been really problematic. But to throw a weird thing out there, and I'm not the first artist to say this, I think Kurt Russell has made mention of this before. I think Matt Damon, maybe, and possibly even Daniel Day-Lewis. But I personally, having been left, having been right, I'm like a fucking pendulum. I have swung both sides of the political spectrum in my life. And it's weird because I picked up certain traits on one side, certain traits on the other, and then kind of settled in the middle. Sometimes I'll go this way. Sometimes it depends on what day it is of the week. But the weird thing is I will no longer voice where I'm statured or where I'm sitting on a online forum or whatever for two reasons. Number one, it may not be that way tomorrow because I am a person who's very open-minded in terms of discussion. When I enter into a discussion with someone about something that I disagree with, I don't go in with the mentality of, hey, I need to convince this person that I'm going to win. I go in more so with the idea of, I want to hear the experience or the alternate point of view, and I'm trying not to escalate emotions into it or make it personal or shit like that because I like to kind of get that different point of view and kind of consider things differently and stuff. As an artist, that's fucking food for me. Like that's how I can come up with a better story idea or a better character or whatever. But then on top of that, I don't want to voice something because I don't want people reading into my work something that may not be there, or it might turn off an audience in a way that's like, you know what I mean? Like if I said something about abortion and then all of a sudden I've got, you know, something with a pregnant woman or a kid getting killed or something like that, automatically people are going to start thinking, oh, this is his opinion on abortion. He's personifying it through this story thing or whatever. Where in actuality, it was just a story point that we thought it'd be really cool to kill the kid this way. And then we had a problem on set where we couldn't get the camera to go this way. So we had to put it over here. And then all of a sudden, you know what I mean? Like suddenly saying that on an online forum has now skewed the way in which the audience will see my work. So to me, that's the biggest hang up is I don't want to influence my audience. I want them to experience it's almost like spoilers. I don't want them to be swayed about what maybe I actually was trying to put into that scene. I want them to see it and interpret it for themselves. And if they grow the way that I was, you know, trying to puppet master them as an artist does, then great. But if, you know what I mean? But if they pull something out of it, then also as an artist, I get to see that and I get to go, wow, maybe subconsciously I did that. Or, you know what I mean? Like I can start learning about myself. But if I start, you know, James Wooding it on the fucking Twitter, then everybody's gonna look at it and go, oh, he's just a fucking asshole. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm not gonna get anything like.
Well, and here's the thing about, I don't know, like I guess because of the kind of person that I am, when I have like an artist or a writer, or a thinker or who I'm really into, I will go like whole ham into like learning about their life, learning about like all the particularities of them. In every single time, what are you going to say, Soco?
Oh, that's how I am. Go ahead.
Same here. I will constantly Google, you know, Matt Damon, Republican or Democrat? And just kind of trying to...
Every single time I see like this person they go through a lifetime, right? They change. Like they have... Like one of my favorite writers is Robert Anton Wilson, and he's very explicitly conscious about this when he's writing forwards to his books in newer editions. He will start off a lot of books with just like, yeah, when I wrote this, it was in 1970, and I'm a very different person now, and I have very different views. Like I was more right-wing here and more like libertarian. Now I'm more anarchistic and more like I'm more influenced by Buddhism. And like the reality is most people live that life. And I think something that's really, unfortunately, something that I think that's missing at this moment, especially in like an online discourse, is this idea that people change over time. And something that lends itself to this notion, I think that people don't see that changing, you know,
that
part
arc,
of
that
people's
character arc.
What influences that actually, I think, is sort of fixation on the avatar, you know, on the like the little circle image and their name next to it. And like I have a lot of appreciation for people who do change change their names in Twitter, right? Where it's like Jow, like yours changes fairly regularly. And I think that says a lot about who you are as a personality, that you go through a lot of changes. You go through not always necessarily changes in stance, but just like what your interests are in the moment. Or like,
Sure.
I know when Halloween comes up, you're going to have a totally different fucking thing, like, and so I think what I would add to that too is one last thing, and something that I think that is kind of newer to the digital age, is that like a pseudonym or like your signature now isn't just a word or a set of words, it's also an image accompanied with a set of words. So like, like right now, if anybody goes on Twitter, they see my name and then an image of like a monocled dragon beast with like a wall-eyed monocled dragon beast. And that's like, just for me, like I picked that picture for my Twitter profile because it suited me in terms of how I feel like when I'm writing on Twitter, which is always a little bit deranged because I feel like Twitter is a deranged place.
Oh, it is.
And so I picked an avatar that would fit that feeling. And I'm curious for you. I mean, Soco, I know like you don't necessarily do a whole lot of social media, but I don't know if you had any thoughts in regards to that sort of that existence, basically.
Well, I mean, social media is a big lie. I know that much.
It's all fake.
No, it is. I know it's funny. You find out so many. I mean, I haven't been going on Twitter as much, even though that's probably my favorite of all the social media outlets. I usually use that as to help me get a lot of different perspectives and different and information. It's good for that, honestly.
Sure.
Now, whether or not some of that information is accurate, that's another court story.
Yeah.
That's another thing. But the thing is, I know it's a lot of it's a big lie. People on there are very I know some people have been caught up in a whole bunch of I can think of some bit more left-leaning personas on there that have been caught in a whole bunch of scandals. They come off as somebody off Twitter as like this social justice hero of some sort, not warrior, as it has a bad connotation to it, but social justice hero. They're really there for the little guy. They're trying to push out this socialist utopia out or whatever it may be. But then it turns out they're the scummiest of people in the world, and people find out. But the thing is, people are just kind of shocked because they associated so much with their persona off of the social media outlet. That's how they viewed this person. That's how they saw that person.
It's like a catfish scenario.
Yeah, essentially. And so, I can think of this. There was this, I forgot his name actually, but he was a medical doctor, and he actually was he was always talking about I guess something with dealing with women's rights and stuff of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
But then it turns out he was like a real what is the word I'm looking for?
Creep.
Yeah, that's it. That's a creep essentially, because there are some people who met him in real life, and he really just a couple of women and they were kind of shocked on how he acted essentially towards them, basically like pulling a whole bunch of moves on them and some which they weren't expecting or whatever, because they were just more with his like they just liked the fact that he brought up awareness about certain issues and such, but they weren't expecting that whatsoever.
It's weird because it's a very predatory thing. That's what happens a lot of times. Like you look at the whole like the Catholic priest scandal and all that stuff. Like people will use that kind of the sheep's clothing to hide so that they can operate undetected. So I mean that's kind of one of the cons about using a pen name is you might be, I don't know what I mean, it can be very misleading. Do you know what I mean? Like there is a ethical question as to ask of whether or not what you're doing is actually right. I've had times in the past when I used a pen name for film festival type stuff because I had suspicions that, you know, my ego had gotten out of hand where I was like, I think I got turned away from this because I have a white sounding name, or a male name, or, you know what I mean? Or something like that. So I would try and submit work to the other festivals under different names and just to see what would happen. So, you know, whether or not that was pure intention or not, that's debatable, because I will say that, you know, very similar work that was submitted under a different name got further in competitions than it had before.
Oh.
And then other times, same outcome, same festival was like, nope, not what we're looking for, not even considered or anything like that. So whether or not what I did was ethical or not can be debated till the cows come home. But where I stand with it is that it was a temporary means for me to kind of understand if maybe the festival was kind of sketchy, because at the end of the day, there's just people. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can be credentialed out the ass, but at the end of the day, you're still a human being with prejudices and biases, whether you're conscious of them or not. And in some instances, I found places where there weren't checks to kind of, you know, oversee to make sure that that wasn't affecting the outcomes. And in other cases, it was pretty much, you know, well handled. But you do see that people will use pseudonyms and stuff like that to sinister means. But I'm curious about another aspect of using a pseudonym, which a lot of people don't really think about, but it's actually kind of prevalent in the filmmaking world. Rainwater, you might have to weigh in a little bit more on this. I don't know if it is in your world or not, but when an artist actually disowns their work, they will release it sometimes under a pseudonym. So I'm pretty sure everybody knows pseudonym name of Alan Smithy at this point. But when a director either isn't happy with the creative outcome of what they made for their work, or they feel like the studio meddled too much, they can disown it. For example, there are some people who are against censorship, right? So they don't like when, you know, their R-rated movie gets edited for television and like the violence and the cursing or whatever, the sexual situations get trimmed and cut out or whatever. And they'll have Alan Smithy just for the television cut, and it's them disowning their work. So I'm curious to know from both of you, especially you, Soco, since I don't know if this is really in your wheelhouse, but should an artist have to stand by their work no matter what gets done to it, or do they have a right to kind of disown their child? What do you guys think?
I would say, for me personally, the person that comes to mind most prevalently is Alan Moore, who has disowned.
I knew you were gonna go there.
He's disowned more work than any artist that I've ever heard of, because he is one of those characters who's just like adamantly about the liberty of his own expression and having ownership of his work. And so he's, as far as I'm aware, he's disowned a lot of work that he did with DC. And like Watchmen, he doesn't want to have anything to do with at this point. I remember, like, I want to say it's the Zack Snyder Watchmen movie. I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that one he's credited as Alan Smithy. I know League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, he's credited as Alan Smithy. He has been notoriously like never wants to be associated with the movies based off of his books. He just never wants it to happen. It happens anyway through some, you know, executive producer finagling or whatever. And so he tries to do everything he can to just, you know, disconnect himself completely from so Alan Smithy has done a lot of work.
Comic work.
And that's why he ended up doing more and more independent stuff as he got older. At this point, like, he's just disowned comics completely, and who knows, you know, where that goes. But nevertheless, like, yeah, he's the one who comes to my mind most immediately. Another example would be the 1984 version of Dune that David Lynch directed, but turns out Alan Smithy directed it instead. And that had to do with, as far as I'm aware, just, I don't think David Lynch liked the whole production from top to bottom.
That was the studio meddling and all that kind of jazz. Yeah.
I don't think he liked the book either, quite frankly, because the stuff that he ended up changing was like kind of a big deal in some respects. And as far as I'm aware, he just didn't like the space kung fu aspects of Dune and some of the other stuff. So, but yeah, those are the two that come to my mind. How about you, Soco?
I don't really much have. I mean, I'm glad you call me an artist. Not
when you
an artist.
podcast, you are an artist in that sense. But I'm curious, Soco, if you want to handle the other half of the question, which is, should an artist have that right to disown their work, or should they have to have their name stand by it? Because I mean, as Rainwater was talking before, we're kind of denied these days that being able to research that character arc of an artist from when they were like something to something else. So like if an artist disowns a film because the studio meddled in it and they make it harder for people to track down that it was them that was doing it, then how do you contrast and compare when they reach that auteur status where they can just do whatever the fuck they want in a movie? And it's like, wow, that is a Tim Burton movie. Look at him, he does whatever the fuck he wants. But then you go back and you look at like some of his early work and you're like, that is not Tim Burton style at all. That must have been a studio thing. Like it makes it harder to compare those things and kind of really figure out who an artist may be. Do you think that they should have to stand by, you know what I mean? Like what they say? And I asked this ironically to someone who is disassociating their personal life from their views. You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you think?
No, I think you should stand by. I think, look, anybody can change their viewpoints over time. I'm going to go back to the words like viewpoints here. You're talking about works
I'm talking
of
about
art.
Style or creative works, but yeah, it's all the same.
I think, and we'll just for me, like, you can have a viewpoint, and if somebody wants to question about a past viewpoint you have, let them go ahead, and you should be able to respond to that. I don't think that's any issue. I guess we can apply that also then to artwork as well too, whether it be film, whether it be a writing, like a novel, whether it be a painting or any other type of work, graphic novel, whatever it may be. I mean, an artist can, if they can choose to be like, well, look, I had that work, I did this, I don't even really want to associate myself with it anymore. I may have produced it. Now that I think on it, it was problematic, or it just doesn't agree with my style now. I think they should be able to say that and do that, because people do have, I think, and people have the right to change. Okay. And I do get sick of that idea that people don't give people that liberty to do so.
Right.
So
I think, well, and part of what has really caused a lot of hang up in terms of, that whole giving people the ability to redeem themselves or giving people the ability to change their viewpoints and all that stuff is usually the immediate reaction is they either don't believe the apology or they don't believe that the person's changed who they are or their views. So it's
usually
like
it's because they just got caught though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
like
true.
they didn't out themselves. It was someone else who unearthed the deed.
And I'll tell you this, my problem is also sometimes I just get an idea and I just say it and I'm like, oh, I didn't even really think about it. I just said it. And then I have to go back
Live journal.
So,
But that's the thing is, like, on social media, everybody likes to be the hunter, but nobody likes to be the hunted. So it's like at a certain point you sort of have to recognize like the dynamic that's going on, right? And I'm not expecting that behavior to change anytime soon, because on a very cynical level, I feel like that's the game that powers social media to exist and gives it the revenue in order for it to continue doing what it's doing. And without that game of people like going around trying to find the catch the fox, whoever the fox is at any given moment in time. Spoiler
alert, it's all of us.
Yeah, right.
Everyone,
including the person doing the hunting. Little do they know they're chasing their own tail.
I was just gonna say something like many people who say these like they're the hunting aspect because like they want to be the hunter because well they want to get a following, they want to get generally I can be a little cynical here because I generally think of like, oh, people are they just want their personal freedom. Basically, they want a living, whereas they can do what they kind of like, and they'll say something in order to kind of get that. If they see it as, hey, this is where I can get maybe something, maybe I can get some sort of freedom from the dullness of my life that I really hate. Working a job I hate or dislike. Actually, I was thinking about that today, or the other day actually. That kind of sucks. I know there's a lot of people who work jobs that that they don't necessarily agree with it, but they have to do it. Okay, with some of the decisions and such, and they also behave a certain way, even though they don't want to behave that way, but they have to because they want to make a living. They want to be able to get something or be financially fine. And I was just like, yeah, it sucks. This is, I think, one of the problems with our, with this kind of bit more capitalist society, whereas people don't have any social network or whatever, whereas they can't just walk away. I think for a lot of people, if they were able to be like, hey, if I can walk away, I'll walk away. But most people are not able to do that.
Which, oddly enough, we are kind of seeing that right now with the whole pandemic and the unemployment benefits thing.
Oh, yeah.
You're seeing a lot of people who are like, you see the signs outside of businesses where people are like, oh, nobody wants to work and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no one really wanted to work at the deli counter at Stop and Shop for minimum wage to begin with, bro.
Yeah,
like,
right.
If you were really into butchery, like, cutting up meat and stuff like that, sure, that's a good way in or whatever, but people want to make a decent wage and they want to be able to do what they love without having, to follow corporate rules and all this kind of, you know what I mean? Like, you really do see people that are kind of not, I would never call these people lazy, but I'm definitely saying that they are doing what they have to do because they're trying to keep a roof over their heads. They're trying to, keep the food on the table and take care of their families and pay their bills and so on and so forth. But you see a lot of that right now, and once everything is settled, knock on woods, people will return to where they got to go and they've got to do what they got to do. But oddly enough, like, the society thing is not going to change, where that expectation of, oh, you work at a butchery, like, I'm pretty sure most vegans don't work at the deli counter.
Right.
Like, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Right.
But that doesn't mean that the guy that's slicing your bologna, is in favor of caging the chickens.
Yeah.
Necessary. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's that weird thing. And that's why we have things like the First Amendment, right? Like the freedom of speech. The government is not supposed to be able to limit what you say or who you're talking about, so on and so forth. But then society doesn't give a fuck about that.
Exactly.
So all you need is a Twitter campaign for you to lose your job, and you know what I mean?
Gain a new job, become a social media star.
It's very true. But that swings, so many ways too. Like, you see people who are victims of tragedies, and suddenly they try and turn it in so that they can become like a D-list celebrity, and it's like, no, sit back down. Somebody shot at you. That doesn't necessarily mean you're fully educated on a particular topic, or, somebody marched by your house. That doesn't mean that you get to be the authoritative person on gun rights, or, it's weird to see how people will do that. But then again, society reacts, and there's really no rules. That's the problem, I think, overall, is there's no rules for society. And even if there are, in 10 minutes, they change.
Absolutely.
That's the biggest thing, which is one of the, oddly enough, I'm going to get creative right here. I always thought, because he's one of the rare characters in superhero history who, quote unquote, pretty much lived quite a few lifetimes, that's what made Wolverine one of the most interesting superheroes ever. is that he has this whole backstory. You know, he's like in medieval times and this and that and all that kind of stuff. Doesn't know how old he is. In one circumstance where you're like a bloodthirsty warrior, you're like a hero. You're a god to the people who you fought for and this and that. And then if you bring him into 2020, where if he still had that kind of mindset, like he's a crazy person.
Right.
And they've never really tackled that kind of approach to it. But that to me is a very interesting way to look at that particular character. Because,
I like that. I like that idea a lot. I'm surprised that I've never seen that covered in like a Wolverine type story, because
Marvel,
that really does.
Call me Disney.
That
I got
really
ideas.
That does say like the thing that is probably going back to your original point, like society doesn't really have rules. It has what is the current mode, and then it switches modes based on whatever, you know.
Yep.
It's seemingly arbitrary at times. And
it's constantly, it's fluid. It's, you know what I mean? Like it's constantly in flux. And the problem that I think I have at the very least is that sometimes it's changed just to be changed so that someone can say I'm the one that changed it, as opposed to this is what's better for all of us. You know what I mean? Like it's what kind of what Soco was talking about earlier, which was people are just trying to, it's a capitalistic kind of mindset where it's like, I want to be the person who leads this, and that will lead me to fame and fortune and, you know, a following and this and that. And then it's odd that some people are very anti-capitalistic, and deep down that's kind of what they're doing in a non-monetary way.
Oh,
if that makes any sense.
It's the same mechanic, just from a different angle. It's the same mechanic of accruing some kind of thing. I was going to say capital. We could say capital. So people like
Profit.
to say social capital instead of just like fiscal or monetary capital. But the same idea of like, you're building influence, you're building repertoire, you're building the things that allow you to have greater degrees of freedom, and usually that means in relation to somebody else, right? Like it's very difficult to acquire more freedom without it also impacting people around you. And that's the thing that's often like what leads to the most resentment that we end up seeing on social media. That's oftentimes the thing that leads to like, you know, the most conflict, basically. So anyway, Soco, do you have any other thoughts in regards to that?
In regards to what again, exactly?
Oh, just like how, I guess going on what I was saying, like so much of, because society's changed in this way where it's not just like money that is like a form of influence now. Yeah, sure. Currency. Yeah. It's now like a social standing, or like the reach of your words, basically.
Yeah, that I mean, I think it's, I think that's something that's become such a, I mean, people like it. It's a way to get to some sort of celebrity status, to be known by others. And yeah, I would say so. It's kind of a weird culture, honestly.
I think it's twofold, personally. I think it's partial, not even just wanting to be celebrity. I think it's a little bit deeper than that. And this is a podcast that I've been wanting to do for a while. We're not doing it all tonight, but I honestly think it comes down to a depression thing, where people want to feel like they have some kind of significance in this very loud, noisy world.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like people want to feel like they have worth.
That, and I was gonna say, no, that's just probably just the way we're always, a lot of us are thought that we're special.
and there's an amount of ego that's tied to that. You know what I mean? Where people think that they can do no wrong, and every thought that crosses through their brain is perfect. Rainwater, what was the original question? Because I had a second angle that I was looking at it from, and I've lost it.
Completely forgotten it.
Shit.
I was going to add one more comment, which is that the concept of celebrity has, I think, in a lot of ways changed fundamentally now in our day and age, though. Because you look at a celebrity like Elvis Presley, right? Like, that was somebody whose outreach was gigantic, and we don't see that in the same way nowadays. Like the celebrities of now, they're big, but they're starting to get more and more fragmented, more and more segmented, because the way that social media kind of like parses out everybody, it's always about more and more and more niche sub communities, so that you can, have more and more fine-tuned pages for everybody. So like somebody who is a celebrity for, a Dungeons and Dragons type in group, I'm not going to know anything about these celebrities, but I'll have a conversation with somebody. Like I have a friend who does a lot of stuff in Magic the Gathering, and he sometimes will name drop people that he knows in the community, and I'm like, I don't know who you're talking about, because I just don't play Magic the Gathering anymore. Like I'm totally disconnected from the community, and like it's because I don't watch the YouTube videos, I don't do the Twitch streams, I don't like play the game. So it's like, unless you're in that sub community, celebrity, like the concept of celebrity totally is different from what we used to have previously, where it was like the Beatles, right? Like even if you didn't like the Beatles, you knew who the Beatles were. Nowadays it's like, in order for you to know who somebody is, they have to be like, wildly huge in a way that is like nowadays it has to be fundamentally like,
you have to have like a cross-platform type thing. You can't just be in one particular genre, because like there's YouTubers who are like have like literally maybe millions, if not hundreds of millions of followers, and I'm like, I don't know who the fuck that is. Like, I'm watching the cooking guy over here who's got 3 million views a video, and I'm like, he's a big deal to me, but it's some other people.
No, like, fucking PewDiePie. Like, I'm just like, who is this? I don't even know who this guy is. And he's got like hundreds of millions of people who watch him. Like, I don't know. Like,
it's. Oh, I was gonna get. Oh no, I was just about to say, like, the early aughts. That's when things really started changing. I would say, with the coming of like Facebook and YouTube, essentially. Which was probably around 2005, right? If I'm not mistaken. This is when you started. Internet caused to change, but I'd say it really just started picking up around that time, probably. Especially when you're making the internet much more easier to produce content and to disperse information faster as well too. It's certainly a wild time with so many people. Like you're talking like. There's people out there who have there's like 19-year-olds who have like 2-3 million people that know them, and I have no idea who the hell they are.
There's people on Twitter that I'm quote unquote good friends with, and I could not tell you their real first name right now. It's very weird in terms of that thing. I just remembered.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No. We keep on actually kind of going back to the actual name stuff, like which what you're doing right now. Sorry.
It's fine. I actually figured out what my second point was going to be to Rainwater's original question. And I'm very curious to know what your guys' response is to this. And immediately I know one of you is going to bring up fucking Dogecoin, which is on the move again. But it's odd to me that the reason why people are trying to scramble for that social stature, like that place in the sun, beyond combating their own self-worth, I guess. Do you think there's a subconscious part within all of us that kind of knows the idea of financial worth is diminishing? Like you talk about the idea of the dollar being currency, but then we're talking about social currency and like stature and stuff like that. Yep. Is there an innate thing within humanity now where we're all subconsciously realizing that money isn't shit? It's like it's made up, basically, just like social media.
Yeah.
And the idea, because in truth be told, like in my mind, machines are replacing all of the jobs. Where the fuck is where are people gonna go eventually? The idea of, what is it called? UBI.
Yeah, universal basic income.
Universal basic income is inevitable, because if the machines take over doing literally everything, which I'm scared to even consider the idea that they'll be doing our art. But,
sure.
if they do, then what becomes the currency, right? It becomes the idea of how many people follow me, how many people can I not employ, but how many people can I bend to my will to do things? Like it used to be however much money I had could buy me things, could hire people to do this, but now it's become an idea of, like the idealism is currency, or the stature is the currency.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where people are, I don't know if it's a subconscious thing or if maybe people are just far ahead of me on it, but it's the idea that if I can get to the top of the Twitter people, like if I can be verified, that means that, when the fucking apocalypse comes, I have less of a chance of being one of the people killed first because I have 60 million followers. At least 12 of them will be willing to die for me if something happens, like someone, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Do you think that might be behind some of that? And that's why people maybe, and going back to our main topic, they kind of use like a pseudonym as almost like how I use it, like branding. Like it's easier, like how the Rainwater talked about, you can create a character who creates emotion. So if you make a name, fucking Benjamin Franklin, Silence Dogood, like that's a fucking branded name with a subtext built into it. You know what I mean? To kind of evoke an emotion or, some kind of like a subtextual message. Do you think that that's kind of what people are doing innately?
Soco, it looked like you had a thought.
I know I'm going deep in the river on this one, but fuck it.
No, I mean, I don't think people are making it for survival purposes. I'm not sure if I understood correctly, but certainly I do think, and I mean, I thought it was kind of interesting the point you said about like, well, are people more realizing the how well, I guess how fake money really is, the value of it really is. Maybe on that point, maybe we're going to see more people kind of realize that it is a bit more about what you believe it to be. There's not necessarily something innate in its value. Maybe some people might come out of that more. I don't know. Maybe we'll see more people like that. I mean, economists already know that it doesn't really have any necessarily innate value of any sort. It's what we put into it, our faith into it. Or they should know that anyway. Economists should know that anyway.
Hopefully.
Yeah. But other things as to whether people are like creating these pseudonyms for, I don't know, some type of future, God knows what. I don't know what for. I mean, my only thing is like people are just creating it in order to get some sort of, my thinking is it kind of protects, for me, for example, I use that as a way of protection.
Yeah.
And other people might be doing it the same thing, or they might be using it as a way to just create a persona. Just like I still think of the Star Politics years ago, the South Park WoW episode, where Randy, he goes on to WoW and World of Warcraft, and
I was going to clarify. Thank you.
Anyway, he goes on to World of Warcraft, and there's a bit where he talks about his character, his avatar, and he makes a big story about him, who he is, and everything, and has basically, put a lot of thought into him, and basically it's this way of kind of escaping his dull reality of actual life, essentially. Maybe that's the other thing I can think of people doing it for. It's a way to create some other persona or avatar for themselves that they can't really necessarily live in their real life, that have to use in the virtual world. So, but that's just my thought.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, so some of my thoughts in regards to this are that, agreeing with what you're saying on a certain level, Jow, that I do think that, like, on a mass populace level, there is like a slow untwining and realization that, like, oh wait, money's bullshit. Like, if you look at the crypto markets, there's like millions and millions of coins of people trying to make their own different kind of currencies, and each currency sort of representing, like, in a certain way, like a different way of self-governance, basically. And I think what's kind of happening right now, and this has been happening since, as computers have been getting better, as we've been having all this, more and more intermingling with the internet, we're starting to dip our waters into the first ideas of what it might be like to live in a post-scarcity world, because online you can kind of start messing around with the idea of post-scarcity. Like we all kind of messed around with it when we were pirating music as kids. Like we were getting the newest hits for free and just sharing it with each other, right?
As long as your mom didn't pick up the phone.
Yeah.
yes, that's right.
Yeah, exactly. So like
that's
our
what you did
generation,
late at night.
Our generation
Leave
in
it running overnight.
particular-
That's what I did. Sorry, Rainwater.
No,
We're
no.
cutting you off. You were trying to get theoretical and we're poking jokes. Go ahead.
No, 56K is real. I mean,
Jesus. Now that I'm old enough to understand what 56K means,
yeah.
we were really living in the Stone Age. But go ahead.
My whole point being though is like as connectivity has gotten better, now that we have connection speeds where you don't really notice the difference as much anymore, right? We are getting into a point where it's kind of just up to the limits of our imagination, and human imagination, while it may not be unlimited, it might as well function as unlimited. And so while that's going to, initially take off in the virtual realm on the internet through computer technology and all that other stuff, it's going to seep out into our physical everyday lives. You were talking earlier about so what happens when all of our jobs become automated? That is, while not necessarily a post-scarcity thing, that's kind of like post-scarcity. Like imagine that you and nobody else you knew had to work to grow tomatoes or farm or whatever. You just have food when you need it because we have the machinery to do it. We have all the means of production are there, and you don't even, you're beyond even having to argue about capitalism and socialism at that point, and this is a little far-fetched, but let's just say, we get to a point where, the cost of producing something is so unbelievably cheap that nobody ever even thinks about having to pay for anything. You can feasibly just use Dogecoin at 20 cents to buy, a carton full of groceries because it's just all so plentiful. So
That's
anyway,
very real though. Remember when we used to have to pay 10 cents a text message?
Yeah.
That if I told a kid that nowadays, it's every text message you send is 10 cents. They would be like, "Wait, how much do I owe?" They would lose their mind.
Yeah.
A day they would be paying $200. But now it's free.
Yeah, and that's the thing is free is really taking off for anything that is related to the virtual, right? You can get so many movies for free, so much music for free. You can get the streaming platform that we're using right now. We don't have to pay a fucking dime for any of this.
Nope.
I mean, there are things that we pay for on another level of our information and stuff like that. But I think right now for us, that's virtually seems like a more than equivalent exchange. And so, all that's going to change over time. But I do think right now we are our generation in particular and the generation after us right now, that is what we're thinking through right now is thinking about what would it be like to live in a world where you don't have to worry about your resources because they're so easy to come by. We haven't entered that period yet. I'm just saying now
I'm waiting for it, Matt. You know that. I want Star Trek Future.
I'm saying you can't enter into the period until you've actually troubleshot it and done all the things previous to actually implementing it. And I think subconsciously we're implementing the theoreticals right now. We're working through it. And we're getting used to the mindset. And because of that, you have all these other things that pop up like social capital, because people are still trying to find ways to value stuff, even when value is being driven down so massive, so quickly. Like the value of art in a lot of ways has been driven down because there's so much available. So now you have to kind of pin that value to things outside of just the work. It's the name of the person, it's their story, it's the drama, it's their YouTube channel, it's all this other stuff that goes alongside of it, so that, you know, like as they like to call value adds, you know, you package everything together to create a more cohesive whole. And so on a certain level, it's like, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because I do want to be able to look at art and then think about it as a whole in connection with the artist. And I want to be able to know the artist as a whole. We just haven't, like, I don't think societally we've worked through that yet with this whole, like we've been talking about, this whole idea that like an artist is a person and has a life and has a timeline that they exist in, an entire arc. And that's going to require the time for more people to come to that time, and maybe drugs, for more people to come to that like revelation that like, oh wait, you know, like, yeah, this person did something really bad, you know, 10 years ago or whatever, but they're like a completely different person now. They've, you know, they've clearly worked through what's gone on, and their work has changed for it too, and they're better for it, and blah blah blah. So anyway, do y'all have anything that y'all would like to say in regards, or even on a different venue?
I think I'm pretty much on the same line as you. I just think that the whole pseudonym thing is more so like you look at the stock market, when something changes, right? Change is bad. That's a mantra that gets you hear a lot. Yeah. People like to safeguard themselves. So, you know, you like, as the saying goes, you hedge your bets. So I feel like sometimes pseudonyms are kind of hedging the bets. Like people are trying to safeguard their actual life. Yeah. But also, you know, it's a shell. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's kind of like it, like you said, the program we're using right now to record this podcast is free. Using a pseudonym is basically free. I mean, you can copyright it and all that kind of shit, but for the most part, it's free, so it's disposable. So if I do something that's suddenly out of vogue in 10 years, all I have to do is delete this name, come up with a different name, throw my face into Face App, you know, throw on a wig and you know, some overalls or some weird thing, and I can become, you know, Joe Bob Billy, and you know, I can have a different thing or whatever and start from scratch. Yeah. So I feel like that's kind of where the whole pseudonym thing is, because like we talked about, the social stature is suddenly a currency that's important. And I think it does come down to survival. I think everybody does want to feel that security. You know what I mean? Like it protects everything about themselves, because even if food and, you know, all that kind of stuff was all automated and we didn't have to worry about it, there are still crazy people who would come and burn down your house, especially if they don't have a 9 to 5 to go to anymore. Like, you know what I mean? It'll be the fucking purge. That's basically another reason why I think we're fighting with each other, is because we don't know what to do with ourselves when there's so much free time to connect with people. There, you know, I frequently hop on Twitter. My job is very lax, especially for the last year and a half, but we won't get into that. But the idea that I'll pop on Twitter and I'll be like, do these people have fucking jobs? Like, how are you tweeting all day, every day? Like, what the fuck else are you doing with your life? Like, it really is starting to make me wonder, like, you know, what the fuck is everybody doing? Like, do we really have to work anymore? Is there anything that we're really doing? But yeah, I think we've wrung all the water out of this particular sponge. But I think it's been a very enlightening discussion. Oh yeah. We've gone on a couple of tangents, but I think overall, I think for artists, I think to kind of sum up everything that we've been talking about, you do have to kind of make a choice as to how you want to be perceived when you go out there, and what, especially with what your art is. I don't think that there is cowardice or bravery in either choice you make, whether you use a pseudonym or not. I feel like it's just a personal choice, and that everyone is entitled to. As an artist, I could never fault someone for experimenting with something. And to kind of create a safety net for yourself is human. That's basically what it comes down to. So, if you're using a pseudonym to protect yourself and, the people you care about, just like fucking Batman, that's within your rights. And I think you're wise to do that. But at the same time, if you're using a pseudonym to create a false persona so that you can just manipulate other people or take advantage of the situation or whatever like that, like, that's the time when I think, I don't even think that's worthwhile, because in this day and age, anyone with the internet can pretty much find out who you are in the long run. And especially if you look back at history at people who use pen names, you could look up the pen name and then there's a fucking Wikipedia page about who it really was. And, you're going to get outed at some point or another. There's really no hiding it. So I wouldn't advise that, but it's your fucking decision. But again, for artists like myself, I use the name just simply out of branding. I think it's a fun way to kind of create my own persona for my filmmaking, and then, kind of shield my personal beliefs from my art to separate it, so that way me as the artist doesn't influence the audience. I let the art influence the audience, or at least let the audience have that open interpretation of it. So I think those are just the things to consider. And I think there is no which way to point for us to point anybody to go at the end of this episode. I think it really comes down to the decision of the artist. And again, it's not a right or wrong decision. It's just like, today I want apples or today I want oranges.
Well, I'll add one last thing, which is in high school, I was in a band called Goth Conglomerate. And so in that band...
Excuse me while I Google.
In that band, we all used monikers. We all used pseudonyms. And it created a really interesting effect where, because none of our names were associated with the work, we were basically all anonymous. We just said and did whatever the fuck we wanted. And it was like, it's terrible music. But it was extremely fun to make, because there was this liberating aspect of like, I don't have to think or worry about like, how people are going to react to seeing my name next to this work, because they're not going to know who I am. They don't know anything about me as a person. They can't make any of those identifications or any of those like, whatever. Like I can see why that's probably very liberating for an artist like Banksy, who thrives off of his anonymity, right?
I can't believe we just now mentioned him, but
I know, right? Like, and he does like a lot of really, like, oftentimes really funny, sometimes thought-provoking. It's across the gamut. But I think for him, I would imagine for him, he's able to do that breadth of work because nobody knows who the fuck he is. And so he doesn't have to identify with any particular train of thought. He doesn't have to identify with any particular style. He can just make stuff.
He's a leader in essence because of it. He's, you know what I mean? That mystique allows him to operate however he wishes.
So I would say, just before we end this podcast, like, there is a benefit to it. If you know how to use it correctly, and like they're like Daft Punk, another example of like, you don't know anything about the two people in that group. For all I know, they're the same people as the two guys in Justice. They might be, they might not, who knows? But that mystique, for them lends a huge amount of the allure of Daft Punk. Maybe they are really robots, who knows? So anyway,
and they're not together anymore, so as we know.
That's right. I forgot about that. So I guess the last final thing I was going to say, if you adopt a pseudonym, just prepare for also adopting like your life as a form of creativity. Like you're now using your entire personality, your entire identity as like a clay to mold on top of that.
Oh man. Okay. Dagnabbit. Okay. Thanks, Matt.
At 120 into the podcast, I am going to cut you off on there because we could go on about creating. That's actually a topic in our Google Doc, Rainwater, about using like social media as an art.
Yeah.
like creating and yourself as an artist is a form of creation. But to be honest with you, as someone who kind of does that a little bit, not really. I mean, it's mostly me. It's exhausting. Not just coming up with shit, but keeping it all straight and figuring out, you know, what did I say about Rob Zombie's Halloween? Like, I don't remember if I loved it or hate it, or which way do I gotta go? But thank you, Soco, for joining us. It was a great episode to have you back on.
Yeah, thank you, Soco.
Welcome back, Bideman. Not Biden. Bideman is available where?
It's on SoundCloud. Everywhere. So soundcloud.com/WBB.
You can get an Apple Podcast as well, too.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, you can get it there as well, too. Though we still need to figure out the kinks on searching for it still. But yes, you can get it there, too.
And you can check out that podcast anytime. Does it have a specific day that it drops on?
Usually on Mondays.
Usually Mondays. Yeah, usually.
Yeah.
And that is Soco and our wonderful co-host, Mr. Rainwater. So basically, if you hate me and you like Soco's appearance and you just want to remove me from your podcast listening altogether, welcome back. My Bideman is the podcast for you.
If you like hearing people talk about Dogecoin,
I do. Especially right now, we're back up to 35 cents, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Good night.
And by the time this actually drops, it'll be back to like 16, but whatever. So again, Soco, thank you so much for coming on. Rainwater, thank you as always for being my awesome co-host. We will see everybody next week. Take it easy.
Later.
Bye.